So here are my thoughts about Jordan Peterson book Maps of Meaning. Long before Jordan Peterson became a best-selling author and YouTube star, he wrote a book called Maps of Meaning. The ideas in this book are the basis for his popular online lectures and recent book 12 Rules for Life, which I criticized in an earlier post. Published in 1999, Maps of Meaning is a long and ambitious synthesis of ideas and mythology, morality, and totalitarian atrocities. How well does it stand up to critical evaluation? Scrutiny shows that Peterson's Maps of Meaning is defective as a work of anthropology, psychology, philosophy, and politics. Its emphasis on religious, myth, and heroic individuals provides a poor blueprint for understanding the origins of totalitarianism, and even poorer guide to overcoming its evil. The meanings of the word murky include both dark and gloomy, and not fully explained or understood. Peterson's book is murky in the first sense, with frequent emphasis on suffering rather than on the joys of love, work, and play. The book is also murky in the second scene, although it is less meandering and disjointed than his videotaped lectures. Nevertheless, I think there is a central line of argument that can be extracted from the book along the following lines. Myths are culturally universal. Myths are the psychological origin of morality. Myths are the philosophical basis for morality. Myth-based morality grounds political judgments about totalitarian states. I will provide quotes from Maps of Meaning that justify the attribution of these claims to Peterson, followed by evidence and arguments that each claim is false. Anthropology. Here are quotes that shows that Peterson follows Carl Jung is supposing that archetypical myths are universal across cultures. We also presently possess in an accessible and complete form the traditional wisdom of a large part of the human race, poses an accurate description of the myths and rituals that contain and condition the implicit and explicit values of almost everyone who has ever lived. The world as a forum for action. The world as a forum for action is composed, essentially, of three constituent elements, which tend to manifest themselves in typical patterns of metaphoric representation. First, in the unexplored territory, the Great Mother, nature creative and destructive, source and final rest place of all determining things. Second is explored territory, the Great Father, culture, protective and tyrannical, cumulative, ancestral wisdom. Third is the process that mediates between unexplored and explored territory, the divine Son, the archetypal individual, creative, exploratory world and vengeful adversary. The assumption of the cultural universality of myths is important for Peterson because he wants mythology to provide the basis for the psychological, philosophical, and political understanding of morality. But his evidence for the generality of such myths is limited to the traditions that runs from Mesopotamia through Judaism and Christianity, with occasional reference to Buddhism. Counterexamples to cultural universality are abundant, such as Pira, people of Brazil, who have no creation myths of interest in beliefs that go beyond personal experience. Arendt 2008. The Iroquois people of North America do have myths about creation and other aspects of the world, but they don't follow the father-mother-son motif that Peterson thinks is universal. Chinese mythology includes many gods, but no indication of the heroic son that Peterson overgeneralizes from Christianity. Therefore, of the thousands of cultures in the world, Peterson has tapped into only one line of thinking, so his maps of meaning give a skewed picture of traditional thoughts. They provide poor evidence that Jung's archetypes are real. Psychology. Even if the myths described by Peterson were culturally universal, it would still be debatable whether they are the psychological or philosophical basis for morality. Peterson assumes that myths are psychological origins of morality. Page 12. These myths are essentially and properly concerned with the nature of successful human existence. Careful comparative analysis of this great body of religious philosophy might allow us to provisionally determine the nature of essential human motivation and morality. If we were willing to admit our ignorance and take the risk, accurate specification of understanding mythological commonalities might comprise the first developmental stage in the conscious evolution of a truly universal system of morality. Page 13. Meaning means implication for behavior output. Logically, therefore, myth presents information relevant to the most fundamental of moral problems. As historical and sociological observation, it may be true that most people have taken their morality from religion, for example from the Ten Commandments of Judaism and Christianity, but there are many exceptions, including the system of social morality developed by Confucius more than 2,500 years ago, which is still influential in China. It emphasizes family and social harmony rather than spiritual values. The personal moral systems of around a billion people who have no religious affiliation or beliefs. The moral views of many atheist philosophers from David Hume to Daniel Dennett who have found cellular basis for ethics. This exception shows that moral psychology can function without an underpinning in mythology or religion. Whether such functioning is desirable is a philosophical question. Philosophy concerns how people do think and act, but philosophy focuses on how people ought to think and act, on the normative rather than the descriptive. Peterson clearly makes more than the descriptive claim that people's morality is often connected to myth. Myth. He normatively assumes that religious mythology is the right way to approach moral thinking and acting. Page 14. Myth portrays what is known and performs a function that, if limited to that, might be regarded as paramount in importance. But myth also presents information that is far more profound, almost unnaturally so, once I would argue properly understood. We all produce models of what is and what should be, and how to transform one into another. We change our behavior when the consequences of that behavior are not what we would like. But sometimes mere alteration in behavior is insufficient. We must change not only what we do, but what we think is important. This means a reconsideration of the nature of the motivational significance of the present, and the reconsideration of the ideal nature of the future. Page 390. Truth is information derived from past experience, derived from past observation of behavior, relevant from the perspective of fundamental motivational and affect. There are philosophical claims that methodology is the best guide to moral significance. The only philosopher mentioned by Peterson in Maps of Meaning is Friedrich Nietzsche, an odd choice given that Nietzsche was highly critical of Christian morality. Peterson ignores many important philosophers who have proposed cellular grounds for morality, including in addition of Confucius. David Hume and Adam Smith based morality on sympathy and other moral sentiments, independent of religion. Immanuel Kant was religious, but his moral theory was based on rights and duties that he thought could be established by reason alone. Ethical utilitarians such as Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill viewed moral judgments as based on evaluating the consequences of actions with respect to their general effect on human happiness. Various thinkers from early socialists to David Wiggins and myself have based ethical judgments on human vital needs, which differ from one's in that they are factors such as food and relationships that are required for human life. All four of these approaches provide a sounder basis for moral judgments than Peterson's Christian mythology. Peterson claims that Western morality and behavior, for example, are predicted on the assumption that every individual is scared. This strong connection of morality with religion has become increasingly dubious since the 18th century. Dubious. 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 Peterson is simply wrong that all Western ethics, including those explicitly formalized in Western law, explicitly explicitly, explicitly formalized in Western law are predicated upon a mythological worldview which which specifically attributes specific, specifically 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 attributes attribute specifically attributes divine status to the individual. Divine. None of the philosophers in my list view human individuals as godlike, and only Kant sees them as a transcendent of material reality. Transcendent. Transcendent. Plato and Aristotle originated Western ethics 2,500 years ago with a stark divorce between philosophy and religion. Stark. Stark divorce between philosophy and religion. Hence, normative judgments about right and wrong don't depend at all on myth or religion. Peterson's metaphysical assumptions are as dubious dubious as his ethical ones. He thinks that myth has a special kind of truth. Page 472. Mythological renditions of history, like those in Bible, are just as true as the standard Western and empirical renditions. Renditions. Rendition. Rendition. Renditions. Renditions. Rendition. Mythological renditions of history like those in Bible are just as true as the standard Western empirical renditions, just as literally true, but how they are true is different. Western historians describe or think they describe what happened. The traditions of mythology and religion describe the significance of what happened. Significance. Peterson adopts the pragmatist view that truth is what works, so that is myth works to provide people with a sense of meaning. Then it's true. The problem with pragmatism's view of truth is that it cannot explain why some beliefs work more than others. For example, why antibiotics are much better at curing infection than prayers. Science works with a correspondence theory of truth. A belief is true if it describes the world accurately. Meaningful lives based on love, work, and play are compatible with scientific theories about how human minds, brains, bodies, and societies actually operate in the world. Compatible. 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 This is compatible. Compatible. Are these compatible? Compatible. In his book and lectures, Peterson motivates his investigations of maps of meaning as an attempt to understand the horrible atrocities of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. Atrocity. atrocity. That is atrocity. Why did Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and other tyrants kill tens of millions of people? How can future atrocities be prevented? There are pressing questions that Peterson thinks can be answered using his myth-based perspective on morality, but better answers are available. Here are some quotes that displays Peterson's contention about the relevance of mythology and religion to politics. Contention. Page 316. And the devil is the spirit who underlies the development of totalitarianism. That's the spirit who is characterized by rigid ideological belief, by the predominance of the rational mind. Underlies. Underlie. A spirit who characterized by a rigid ideological belief. rigid, 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 ideological belief, rigid, rigid. Ideological belief, by reliance on the lie as a model of adaptation, by refusal to admit to the existence of error, or to appreciate the necessity of deviance, and by the inevitable development of hatred for the self and world. Inevitable, 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 development of hatred for the self and world, hatred, 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 hatred for the self and world, hatred. Page 300. Inevitable development for hatred for self and world. Page 321. The presumption of absolute knowledge, which is the cardinal sin of the rational spirit, is therefore prima facie equivalent to the rejection of the hero, to the rejection of Christ, of the world of God, of the divine process that mediates between order and chaos. The arrogance of the totalitarian stance is ineradicably opposed to the humility of creative exploration. The presumption of absolute knowledge. Presumption. Of absolute knowledge, which is cardinal sin of the rational spirit. Cardinal. Equivalent. Prima equivalent. Equivalent. Prima facie. To the rejection of the hero, to the rejection of Christ, of the world of God, of the divine process that mediates between order and chaos, the arrogance. Arrogance. The arrogance of the totalitarian stance. Of the totalitarian stance. Stance. Is ineradicably opposed to the humility of creative exploration. Ineradicably. Ineradicably opposed to the humility of creative exploration. Creative exploration. Творческое исследование. Creative exploration. Page 353. There are abandoned massacres, the killing fields in Cambodia. Massacre. Massacre. There weren't massacres, the killing fields in Cambodia, the tens of millions dead, by Solzhenitsyn estimate, as a consequence of internal repression in the Soviet Union. The untold regions butchered during China's Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward. Another black joke, accompanied upon occasion, accompanied upon occasion, to accompany, occasion, in the particular by devouring of the victim, devour, 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 to devour, 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 by devouring of the victim. The planned humiliation, 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 humiliate, humiliate. Stop this humiliation. Humiliation. Humi- and rape of hundreds of Muslim women in Yugoslavia, the Holocaust of Nazi, the carnage repatriated by the Japanese in mainland China. Such events are not attributable to human kinship with the animal. Kinship. With the animal, the innocent animal, or even by the desire to protect territory, interpersonal and intrapsychic, by the deep-rooted spiritual sickness. Peterson thinks that the solution to totalitarian horrors and spiritual sickness is the heroic individual. The hero rejects identification with the group as the ideal of life, preferring to follow the dictates of his consequence and his heart, his identification with meaning, and his refusal to sacrifice meaning for security, renders existence acceptable despite its tragedy. A society predicted upon belief in the paramount divinity of the individual allows personal interests to flourish and to serve as the power that opposes the tyranny of culture and the terror of nature. Predicate. Predicate. Upon belief in the paramount divinity. Paramount divinity. Paramount. 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 A society predicated upon belief in the paramount divinity of the individual allows personal interest to flourish and to serve as the power that opposes the tyranny of culture and the terror of nature. Divinity. Divinity. Of the individual allows personal interest to flourish. 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 And to serve as the power that opposes the general culture and feral nature. Peterson makes two central contentions that require evaluation. Evaluation. Contentions. The first is totalitarianism is a spiritual problem that result of neglecting the moral tradition rooted in Christianity. The second is that the best way to resolve this problem is spiritual, based on the divinity of the individual. For Peterson, the solution of totalitarianism is a combination of religion and individualism. Totalitarianism. 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 Neglect. to neglect the moral tradition rooted in Christianity. The second best way to resolve this problem is spiritual based on divinity of the individual for the various problem. Peterson doesn't provide detailed maps of the ideologies and that produced the greatest atrocities of the 20th century. In contrast, current psychological theories of thoughts and emotions show how the diagram ideologies using cognitive affective maps. These maps provide a way of appreciating the structure and appeal of ideologies such as generating a much deeper psychological F and C ideologies, generating a much deeper psychological explanation of T than spiritual sickness. Another crucial aspect of the totalitarian regimes is the presence of psychopathic leaders such as H and S who have no sympathy for their victims. Such evil can be explained psychologically without invoking the devil or other religious categories, as I described in my post, Why is There Evil? Explanation of the value systems of ideologies and the roots of psychopathy are only parts of the understanding of totalitarianism, but the point is the direction of the secular rather than mythological understanding of atrocities. Mythological. Mythological. Similarly, there are better ways to counter T than religious individualism. One response to the horrors of the Second World War was the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It establishes rights and freedoms that apply to people without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, language, religion, political or another opinion, nation or social origin, property, birth, or another status. These rights include life, liberty, personal security, equality before the law, and freedom of thought, consequence, and religion. Although the Universal Declaration guarantees freedom of religion, it's not in the least religious and doesn't depend on mythologies of any kind, nor is it narrowly individualist because it recognizes important social dimensions such as the right to equal pay for equal work and the right to form and join trade unions. The ideas expressed in the Universal Declaration are very different from the narrow individualism expounded by Peterson in his writing and videos. He describes himself as a classical liberal, an ideology that emphasizes personal liberty over equity and social welfare, in keeping with his assumption of the divinity of individuals. In contrast, the Universal Declaration expresses the alternative value system of social democracy, which insists that the state has an important role to play in enabling all individuals, regardless of wealth, to flourish as human beings. Social democracy is not the same as socialism, for it appreciates the freedoms and economic growth that capitalist economies allow. In contrast, basing politics on religious individualism tends to be conservative, ensuring that rich people can maintain freedoms while others suffer. Peterson writes, as if religious individualism is the best alternative to totalitarianism, but social democracy provides a morally superior way of challenging oppression. Peterson uses ideas about dominance hierarchies to downgrade equality as a social goal and the direct extension of rights to cover gender identity and expression as required by Canada's recent Bill C.